And again, good morning, everybody, and good to see you again for another in the line of reasoning of the course, another Demo Friday, but the first official Demo Friday of this semester. I always like to take one moment to introduce this topic, the topic of reciprocal teaching. For multiple reasons. One of the reasons is it's a reading comprehension technique that I've gotten to know very well, in no small part because of my own experience doing research on reading comprehension. And because it's one of those reading comprehension techniques, approaches. I mean, it's hard to define what RT really is. It's kind of like an approach, but at the same time, it's a technique. It's a little bit of both. But the main point is that this is one of those things that is based on years of research in the field of reading comprehension. So this is not just something that people came up out of nowhere. No, there is a lot of research behind it, and a lot of research about what it means to read and what it means to comprehend. And it's important for all those young teachers who may be watching this video once it's in our YouTube channel, and for all of you, the students, when you want to watch this again, to make sure that your instructional decisions, they are guided by research and by the research people are doing. Ask for the research behind the instructional practices that they're offering you. Expect that the instructional practices that they're promoting and that they're encouraging you to do are research-based, that there are people, there is research behind it, whether people around the world or your own research or whatever research you do in school, that research is guiding the decisions. So let's begin with one question that I have for all of you. And here's the first question. How do you usually read in small groups? What do you think about that for 1 minute, for 1 second right here, everybody? How do you usually read in small groups? And if anybody wants to venture an answer, let me know. If somebody wants to answer the question, how do you usually read in small groups? What do you do when you're in a class and the professor or instructor tells you, okay, now you're going to read? What do you do?
Well, teacher, honestly, I would roll my eyes.
You would roll your eyes. Okay, that's a start. So Catalina would roll her eyes. Okay. Why would Catalina roll her eyes? That's a question I would like to ask right now.
Because I don't like reading in small groups. Unless it's like the menu of a restaurant or something.
Yeah, but let's just play with that for 1 minute. Why don't you like reading in groups?
Because I don't know, sometimes I feel that I'm reading wrong, or I feel that it's kind of hard to focus on the other person when it's reading.
All right, wait. Let's go. Okay, let me keep digging. What do you mean by reading? No. What do you mean reading wrong? What do you mean by reading wrong? That's a good question. That's a question I want to ask right now. When you say reading wrong, what do you mean?
Well, I do it quite well, but when you have to read it out loud, sometimes now it's
time to get into the heart of the matter. But thank you. Continue.
Okay, so sometimes, there's a weird word that you don't know how to pronounce, or the accent is kind of wrong. Sometimes you flip a comma.
All right,
Not always, but
okay. So here we have the first major issue, and it's the issue of the reading out loud. We're gonna get to that We're going to get to that in a moment. About the whole reading out loud issue. One says split the whole stuff, okay? And we're going to see how that works. The splitting the reading, but not the way you do it. We're going to see that there is that splitting the reading or splitting the reading in sections or segmenting the reading, it's a good way to read. Probably the idea that you read part one, you read part two, you read part three, and you read part four. That's what doesn't work. So we'll get to those two things. Keywords. Okay. So anybody else? Any last thoughts on this one? Any last thoughts?
We must be read in the same part. Everybody, we must be read in the same part. Everybody.
Okay. Yes. That's what we do. Now, you should all be reading the same part. Now we're going to see later is that you can divide what people do in that part. So now we have three very good ideas. So we have the problem of the reading out loud. We have the problem, the issue of what it means to segment it, and what people should be doing if they're reading the same part. And we're gonna get to those three elements in this introduction before you go into the breakout rooms to practice. So now that we clarified, yes, this is what you usually do. This is what you usually do. This is what Catalina was pointing out. So you have a group of students, 4 or 5, you get the text, and there is one student we designate to read the text aloud. Whoever, someone read the text aloud, and then the other 4 are listening. And then the first question I always like to ask is, are you really paying attention? When someone is reading aloud, are you paying attention? And second, are you really engaged with the text? Let me construct these two things. So, and beginning from the reading aloud. Reading aloud is a very important and necessary element of getting your students engaged in reading. So reading aloud is important and reading aloud is necessary, but there are very good ways to do it and there are terrible ways to do it. This particular approach where you have one student reading aloud and the others listening is not a very good way to read aloud. In fact, it's one of the worst ways to engage in reading aloud. Because as Catalina pointed out, when you start reading aloud like this, you're more concerned about sounding out the words, pronouncing the word correctly. So you're more concerned about the fluency than you are about comprehension. So I would tell teachers out there, don't do this. And there are decades of research in the field of literacy that support that assertion. So I'm not making this up. There is research, lots of research that says this is not a good way to read in groups. This does not maximize the group. This does not create engagement with the text. This actually detaches you from the text. Yes, go ahead.
This also applies, for example, when, it is still boring for me, at least when I was in school and when I was in high school too. But if it's a little amount of text, like read the activity, like in that case, is also like bad.
Reading aloud, no, there has to be a good reason to read aloud.
Okay.
And and we're gonna now, spoiler alert, next week when we do our demo Friday, we are going to talk about reading aloud. We're going to talk about storytelling. We're going to talk about, we're going to see some ways how you can engage students in reading aloud. And there are ways that you can use reading aloud as a way to engage in conversation with the students about what they read. But that's a different technique, that's a different way to approach reading comprehension. If you are working in groups, what you want is to maximize the group and engage the group with the text they're reading. That's a very different way to approach it. That sometimes we have students working groups all the time, and we do this all the time. In this class, we do a lot of group work. But how often do we really maximize the possibilities and the potential that teamwork offers? And I'm thinking here, when I think about group work and I think about teamwork, I'm always thinking about large classes. And I'm thinking about those teachers who have 30, 40, 45 students, and how you maximize the little time you have, and how you maximize the interaction with the students, and the interaction that students can have with each other. When you have 45 people interacting, it's impossible. But if you can really create meaningful possibilities for students to work in smaller groups and use the smaller groups as a learning opportunity, that provides more possibilities for feedback, more possibilities for language practice, more possibilities for learning. So that's what's at the heart of the matter here, that we're talking about reading, but what we're talking about in the end is learning through reading and learning through working in groups. So that's our goal when we do reading. Now, and Valentina posted in the comments, you can't even be sure if the one who's reading is paying attention to text. They could be more focused on reading well than on the text content. Thank you, Valentina. That's the point here. Reading aloud, it becomes an exercise on fluency and pronunciation if you're not careful, if you don't know how to do it well. I mean, if you don't know how to approach the reading aloud well. And then what happens is when you start reading aloud, sometimes if you're not used to doing this, you're gonna become very self-conscious. And even when you read aloud, if you read aloud, that should become a moment that leads to a discussion, or to lead with questions, or to lead to you to talk about what you read. But that's a very different thing. That's what you call a read aloud, or what you call a think aloud. And those are different reading comprehension techniques. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about that on the next demo Friday, when we tackle storytelling and read aloud as a specific technique that you can apply with your students. So we know this situation doesn't work. It's not conducive to learning. So that brings us to the question: how do we maximize group work for better comprehension? How do we maximize group work for better comprehension? That, I think, is at the heart of the matter of this. And equally important is the difference between decoding and comprehension. And I think conceptually, that's where we are. So when we start asking the question of how we maximize group work for comprehension, the first thing we have to think about is moving away from the notion of decoding and moving into comprehension. When you talk about decoding, we're talking about what you do when you read aloud. You focus on the graphings and the morphemes, and mostly you just focus on sounding out into the words. So you just focus on focus, graphics, morphemes. You just focus on the words themselves. But you're so, and especially when you're learning a second language, you're so preoccupied with sounding out the words properly and pronouncing the words properly that your focus moves away from the text in general and stays too close to the specific words. So you're so worried about, let's say, kind of like the expression that says you can miss the forest for the trees. You're so worried about every tree that you don't realize you're in a forest. And sometimes you need to see the forest, and sometimes you need to see the trees. But for comprehension, I really want to focus on the larger picture, focus on the forest, focus on the content, focus on the meaning. That's comprehension. I talk about comprehension when I start focusing on content and I start focusing on the meaning of the stuff I'm reading. And then I can navigate, and then there are ways to navigate about the words you don't understand. There are ways to navigate around the words you cannot pronounce well. And that becomes secondary when it comes to comprehension. And there are ways for you to make sense of the words that you don't understand by using contextual clues, by using particular, by using previous and following sentences. There are different techniques that good readers use in order to navigate the text. But the ultimate goal of a good reader is comprehension, not decoding. The ultimate goal of your instructional practices when it comes to reading has to go into comprehension, not into decoding. Decoding is not enough. Comprehension should be the ultimate goal, whether you're teaching to read in the first language or you're teaching to read in the second language. It's comprehension. And again, there is research, and by people who have been doing this a lot longer than I have and who are specialized in reading, who confirm that this is the way to move forward. So the way to move forward is to focus on comprehension. And to focus on comprehension when you're working and using the possibility of working with groups, working in groups. What do you get when you work in groups? You get people you can talk to. You get people you can talk to about the text. And the idea is that if I have 4 or 5 of you reading, there should be moments where the 4 or 5 of you can talk about what you're reading. So it's not going back into the previous comment by Juan, that I'm going to ask this person to read one part, the second part, the third part, fourth part, and then we kind of try to bring it together. No. There are ways in which I can divide say, the load or share the task among the 4 people who are, or the 5 people or the 6 people who are reading. So at the end, we can have conversations about what we are reading. And that's what this idea of reciprocal teaching, the reciprocal teaching approach, that initially was developed in the 1980s, particularly by the work of Marie Palingsar. And I want to work at those 4 words I highlighted in the definition. So when you say reciprocal teaching is an evidence-based, it goes back into what I said at the beginning of the video. This is based on research. This is not just intuition. This is not just serendipity. This is not just coincidence. No, this is based on research that people have done about how good readers read. And I want to emphasize that part again. These techniques and these approaches work from the notion of, okay, let's look at what really good readers are doing, and let's learn from that so we can help other readers do it. We always need to look at real examples for inspiration. We always need to look at what we call, and it's not like looking at mentor texts, but people who do it well are a mentor text of their own. I always make the same example. If you want to learn to shoot free throws, if you play football or soccer, for some of the people who call it soccer, but particularly football, if you want to learn to shoot a free throw, what are you going to do? You go and maybe you start looking for videos of some of the best players in the world doing that. So maybe you look at how David Beckham used to do it like a day. You want to look at videos of Leo Messi doing it, Cristiano Ronaldo. If you want to learn a little bit about basketball, then maybe you watch all videos of Michael Jordan or videos of Kobe Bryant, or watch LeBron James. You look for good examples. If you want to get a good idea what play the cello looks like, you're going to go online and look for Yo-Yo Ma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you look for good examples. And those good examples are things that we can find in research. The second idea is the dialogic. So the key to have people come together in a group is give them a space to talk and to dialogue, and to, through conversation, be able to help each other, because that goes into the same part, a collaborative community. So if I have you work in a group of 3, 4, or 5, the whole idea is the 3, 4, or 5 of you should work together and as a community help each other make sense of what you do or make sense of what you read. And then the idea of small group reading discussion. Whole group discussion is not, I mean, you're never going to be able to have a whole group discussion. I cannot have a whole group discussion with 20 people, with 30 people. It's impossible. So that's what we have, that's why we try to maximize the power of the small group. 5 or 6 people, 4 people, 4 students coming together and engaging in dialogue around the reading, around the text. That's what we do through reciprocal teaching. By the way, for the students, if at some point you have questions about what we're discussing here, please remember, you can always use the raise hand option that we have here, or just open the microphone or type something in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat all the time while we're doing the demo. So don't wait forever. So this is the definition of reciprocal teaching. And yes, Catalina.
Hey, I wanted to ask something. I promised that after this, I would shut the fuck up for real. I wanted to ask you if how this will work in a space where it's like a lot of noise, because I remember that my school, it was famous for the amount of people that it could keep inside in that little school. So there were a lot of noise, and that kind of make harder when they say like read this, you're like, and especially when I was in class. So how we will try to
okay. First of all, when we and I'm gonna look at we're gonna revisit this in a moment, but one of the first elements, and I want to go back to that picture right here. And if you look at this picture right here, you see these 4 cats right here. Are they talking while they are reading?
No.
Keep that thought in mind, because that's the key to this. So one of the things that happens when you do reciprocal teaching is you do not talk while you're reading. Reciprocal teaching actually gives a lot of favors and gives a lot of value to the potential of silent reading. We don't do silent reading enough because we always want to be reading aloud, or we always want to favor reading aloud. Again, reading aloud has a place and a time. It has a reason to be, and it has usefulness, and it can be a very, very effective way to engage students in the text. But it has to be used properly, and it has to be used at the right time, and it has to be used, let's say, consciously and knowingly, not randomly, and not always. These are things, I mean, reciprocal teaching is something that you can use permanently in your class. Reading aloud is something you have to know how to use it and when to play it out. So that's one part of the answer. Okay, no, you're gonna have moments where it is silent reading, and then you're gonna come together to talk about what you read. And when you talk about what you read, there is a method, there is a way to do it. And that is the strategies. There are 4 main strategies that we employ when we do reciprocal teaching. These 4 strategies, again, this comes from the research that says that people did in the 1970s and 1980s, and even the 1990s, where people started asking the question, what is it that good readers always do? So it went with the question, what is it that good readers always do? And they found that there were 4 things that good readers always did unconsciously. They didn't know, I mean, the researchers found the patterns. I mean, and good readers didn't do it first, they just did it. One of the things they did was constantly engaged in the process of prediction. They predicted a lot. So it means as they read, their brain started anticipating what was coming next. So they started anticipating the possible scenarios and the possible directions in which the reading would go. And they started predicting from the moment they started reading. So from the title, you start predicting. And think about prediction. It's something we do all the time. For example, when you watch the movie, think about what very simple, down-to-earth prediction moment. When we used to go to the movie theater, and you would get to the theater, you would have the popcorn, and do it by yourself, with a friend, on a date. However it is that you, with your parents, with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, with your best buddy, by yourself, it doesn't matter. It's beyond the point. But let's say you're with a friend, or you're with a good friend, you're on a date, blah, blah, and you watch it, and you start watching the trailers. You start watching the movie trailers. And when you're watching the movie trailers, sometimes, think about it, sometimes we would turn to the person next to us, a friend or a date or our dad or mom, and you would look at each other and say, I want to watch this movie. Or, no, what, this one, forget it. I'm not even going to download it. That's predicting. It's anticipating or getting yourself ready for the text. And as you read, as you go, even when you're watching movies, you start thinking what's going to happen. You start thinking about what's going to happen later. You start thinking what's going to happen later. Or you're watching a movie and you're already thinking, if it's one of those, let's say one of those mystery movies or a thriller, and you already start, as you're watching the movie, you're already starting to guess who the assassin is, or who killed it, or who the bad guy is, stuff like that. That's predictive. And that's something we do all the time. A second strategy is clarification. So good readers are constantly connecting ideas across the text to make sense of words they don't understand, to make sense of sentences they don't understand, to make sentences about different things that they think are not completely clear and may need a little bit of extra help. Then there is the idea of questioning. So good readers ask a lot of questions about what they read and about the greater picture. So they ask questions that are both literal and more reflective and more critical. And then good readers also summarize. So you start summarizing small sections of what you read, and then you summarize the whole thing. So these are the 4 things that we notice in research on reading comprehension that good readers always do. So if these are things we notice our parents, what we want is all of our students to be able to do this at the end. So we want our students to learn to predict, to learn to clarify, to learn to question, and to learn to summarize. And these are the 4 essentials. So these are the 4 that you always do when you do reciprocal teaching. Now, there are a few others that we do. For example, you can visualize. It means you can come together, or one person can make a drawing about the text, about some ideas from the text, create a graphic organizer, make a meme, for example. Then you can have orientating, so it's gonna giving people guidance on where to go with the reading, connecting. So it's now really creating serious connections between that text and the other topic we're talking about in the course, or things that you see in the world, and of course giving feedback. So as part of the conversations, You can, one person can give feedback to the questions you raised, or the clarifications you came up with, or the predictions, or the summaries. I usually, when I do reciprocal teaching with my students, I usually do visualizing. But it's important to know that that's not the only additional strategy that is present. So as we start moving into doing reciprocal teaching, there are some things to remember. First of all, the strategies are not sequential or hierarchical. It means you don't have to go predicting, clarifying, questioning, summarizing. They can happen at different moments, and good readers don't do them in order. No one is more important than the other. They are equally important. When you're introducing your students to the strategies for reciprocal teaching, there has to be repetition. In classes I observed back in the day, where people did reciprocal teaching, and I remember my experiences when I was a doctoral student doing research in Chicago, observing classes in bilingual schools in Chicago. The teachers always began the class by going over the strategies. So asking the students, what are the strategies? Prediction, summarizing, clarification, question. They ask the students to briefly explain them. So what's predicting? What is clarifying? What is summarizing? What is question? And even in the classrooms, they would have a board, or they had like a poster that had the information always. The students could get used to it. So if you start doing reciprocal teaching as an instructional strategy, it's something you're going to do often. It's not something you're going to do just once and forget about it. No, you're going to turn it into part of your classroom routine. So students get used to the idea that, oh, it's time for reading. At some point after the repetition and after the open and over the instructional practice, they're going to be ready. They're going to be, in reading mode. So in reading mode means we get in small groups and we know what to do. It's important in that process to provide a lot of scaffolding. You need to provide a lot of support with examples and help your students, give them examples of how you predict. Show them what kinds of questions they can ask. Show them the class of clarification that they can ask or find. Show them how to make a summary, and even how different a summary is from a paraphrase. Because those are things that, yes, you want to provide specific instruction for your students and a lot of interaction. So your job as a teacher, when you have the small groups, is to move around the groups and talk to them. I think we'll see that in the next slide, or one of the next slides. So start to engage with the reading. So always create reading teams. And make sure that there is one person that's keeping track of the action. I remember some of the classrooms, they call them team captains. And so I brought a captain, if you will. I would see, like, in some of the teams, there would be one person who was the captain. So the team captain was the person kind of making sure we all participated and everybody did one of the tasks. You assign one of the strategies. So in a group, one of you is going to do the predicting, one of you is going to do the summarizing, one of you is going to do the question, one of you is going to clarify. And you can rotate the strategy, so all the students know how to do all of that. Again, when you're reading by yourself, you use all four at different moments and at different intervals as part of the reading process. Important, you don't read the whole thing in one sitting. No. Tell the students how much they need to read. So you read small sections, maybe one page, or read it, or if you're working with elementary or especially elementary school students, look at the text beforehand and say split it in 3 or 4 sections. And tell the students, okay, you're going to read from here until the title that says blah. And then from that title to the next title to a title that says this, and then till the end. So they can read. And again, when you read silently. When you read in your small group, each of you is reading silently, is reading quietly. There is no need for any member of the team to read aloud to the rest of you. Because as Catalina just pointed out, that is actually distracting. If one person starts reading aloud, the others are going to lose focus, or the others are going to tune out. I don't know you, but sometimes it happens if I'm in someone starts reading aloud, I think I tune myself out sometimes. So don't do that. Once you have decided to pit stop, when you decide to stop the moment when you stop reading one section, then every student does their thing. So prediction person does predicting, clarification person does their thing, and so on and so forth. And the others collaborate. So you can ask more questions, you can ask for details, you can provide ideas. So to get in, if you're the teacher, as your students read, you engage, you can go to each group for a small moment and pay attention to what they're doing. Maybe while they're beginning, just you can be there just to provide scaffolding, to give them some ideas on how to do it better. As they become more depth with the strategies, then you can engage in conversation with them. So here's where, working in the small groups, it's better, because then if you have a 40-person class and you divide the class in 8 groups, you only have to go. You don't have to talk to 45 people. You have to talk to 8 groups. That gives you a little more time to work with everybody. Once you have established the reading comprehension technique, and the follow-up video to this is going to be the experience of one of my grad students who works with reciprocal teaching in his school, and he does it using Google Hangouts and WhatsApp. So this is something that you can adapt to tools like this, like online conferencing and instant messaging. And there is a level of engagement that you have with the students. At the end, if you have the time, try to make sure you bring everybody. So make sure that in your groups, students have time to consolidate their ideas. And then as a whole class, talk about what you learned about reading and talk about what you learned about the reading process. And why we talk about the lessons learned about reading, because one of the key elements of reading reciprocal teaching is engaging with metacognition. It's developing that awareness and that deep consciousness about what we're doing in the process of learning. So those 4 things, the fact that they're metacognitive strategies. So we want to really bring them to the forefront. At this point, and before we go into the breakout groups, are there any questions? They pick up the gist. You're asking about what is the main difference between summarizing and clarifying? Summarizing refers to, okay, let's talk about the main idea of this section, of the reading, or the reading in general. Clarification, and let's go back to that slide. Clarification is about, okay, let's look up parts of the text that maybe we need to discuss further, or some vocabulary words that were not very clear, or this sentence was confusing. That questioning, just to clarify that, questioning, it's more about the larger, like some of the issues that you can generate or the issues you can raise as a result of the reading. So again, summarizing is just the main idea, and clarification is more, let's look at specific parts that maybe we need to talk a little more in detail because I didn't understand it. So summarizing is, this is what the text is about. Clarification, yeah, but this is what it's about, but I'm not sure about this part or this word or this section. Does that make sense? So with that, now it's time for a demo. Now we're gonna get into the demo. So for this demo, this is what's gonna happen. you are all working in groups. You have 6 teams right now. So you're all working in your teams. You're gonna see that there are breakout rooms. We have 6 breakout rooms. So based on what team you are, team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4, team 5, or team 6, when I finish giving instructions, not before, when I finish giving instructions, you're gonna go into your breakout rooms. And this is gonna be a very, I always like to do a very meta reciprocal teaching demonstration. So you're gonna be, it is very meta. You're gonna be doing reciprocal teaching as you read a text about reciprocal teaching. It's like reciprocal teaching section or something like that. So you're gonna read a text about reciprocal teaching using the techniques from reciprocal teaching. So teams 1 and 6, remember these readings are all available on Moodle. So you should go to the Moodle site and look for them. Teams 1 and 6 are gonna read the text of Mike McCallum, 2014. Teams 2 and 4 are gonna read the text by Meyer, 2010. And teams 3 and 5 are gonna read the text by Strickland, 2011. So once you go to the breakout rooms, you decide on who's gonna be doing what. So the 3 or 4 of you focus on the top 4 because I think the teams are 4. If you have 5, then think of the 5th person, what the 5th person can do. Agree on reading one page at a time, or agree on what you want to, again, make decisions as a team. How far? Because you can read the whole thing. And make sure you have time to talk about the readings. So the demo is going to be about 25 minutes. So you're not going to get to read the whole thing. What's important is that in those 25 minutes, you get a taste. You get a taste for what that particular element of reciprocal teaching is about. It doesn't matter if you don't finish the reading. This is, after all, a demo. So let's recap. 6 teams. Every team is going to pick up one reading. And again, you don't are expected to finish the whole thing, but get yourself started and get yourselves acquainted with the reading. And most importantly, do the thing. Do the reciprocal teaching part. So this is the time where now everybody should be moving into your breakout rooms. There are 6 teams that we have for the activity we're developing in this unit. You work in those teams. So you should start going into your breakout rooms right now. And I'll be calling you back in about 20 minutes. So around 9:20, 9:26, 9:27, before 9:30, I'll be recalling everybody back into the room. So, stop, get to work. Everybody to the breakout rooms right now. We're back for the breakout rooms, and here's the moment where we're going to consolidate the activity. Again, you probably didn't have a lot of time to get it all done because it was a very short moment just to get a feel for that. But if you managed to start reading and had some time to discuss, what did you learn about this activity today? The microphone, the floor is open for anybody who wants to share some ideas. So,
like a reflection about the activity.
Yeah. What did you learn? Maybe if you had.
I would say that even though I'm not a big fan of social interaction in teams and groups and everything, I think I realized that in this kind of activities it's kind of interesting to meet in groups, because when you don't have in my case, you don't have like that big critical ability to read and stuff. I think it's, for me, it's really interesting to see what other people says. And I was thinking about it when I was in school, and then one of my partners made like this very interesting question that I didn't even think of. I didn't imagine that it could create this question, and it was really interesting, I would say. So I think that's why it's kind of important to make it.
Exactly. So yeah. So think about again. Think about and you probably didn't have a lot of time. So imagine what's going to happen when you start doing this regularly. But think about the possibilities to talk about that once you get in the groups and you really get to talk about what you read and all the possibilities to really understand the text more deeply. Does anybody have any other thoughts besides Catalina?
Professor,
Yes, Juan.
during the activity and even during your explanation before, I was wondering about something. What kind of outputs can students produce with this approach? Because you have explained like the steps and the characteristics of the approach, but I would like to know what kind of outputs they can produce with this kind of activities.
All right. When you mean outputs, what are you talking about exactly?
I know that an output, or as far as I understand the term, is like after the activity and the input that usually the teacher gives to the students, they have to produce something at the end. Like there is a production. I recognize that probably just talking and discussing the stuff in the same group will be a kind of output because they are producing ideas.
Exactly.
I recognize that.
Yes.
But my question is, how can you articulate every single member of the group to create a very big output?
No, that's the thing. You have to think about, you need to stop thinking about that input output initial idea. What happens when you're in the group is the idea is everybody should have the chance to talk about the reading. And sometimes all you need to do is just to meet with your group and everybody get the chance to talk about a little bit of what they did. And that's as far as it goes. That's the output. Don't think that necessarily a reading activity in class has to lead to something even bigger. No, sometimes it's just reading. And it's just the possibility to talk about the reading. Because sometimes when we talk about the reading or when we engage with the reading by talking, it's when we read out loud. And that's not conducive to conversation. The conversation is the output. The conversation is what's supposed to happen. And in that moment, when you're reading it for like a class activity, it's how you understand the reading better by talking to each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually, I connect that idea with another idea from Jorge La Rosa, who talks about experience. Mm-hmm. And reading out loud is not producing really an experience. Because
exactly.
Even if you have quality and you know how to read well and how to do it efficiently, if you are not like connecting it with your own knowledge and producing something, it is not creating a real experience.
Exactly. So thank you. I think you got to the heart of the matter. It's what kind of experiences, I'm going to use your words, what kind of experiences we are creating in the moment of reading. One of the ideas of doing reading in class is to get students engaged with reading. Getting your students to want to read more. Reading aloud, the way we do that reading activity where one person reads aloud and the others listen, does not engage them in reading. There is no engagement. There is no real engagement. There is no way to respond to the text. And that's one of the key elements that part of the conversation is actually thinking about responding to the text. It's actually reacting to the text. When you have this unidirectional approach where you read, I read, you listen, there is no interaction with the text. There is no way to, there's no chance to respond to the text. Reciprocal teaching wants to get into that element of let's respond to the text. Let's respond to the experience of the text. Does anybody else want to have just one or two final thoughts before we finish the demo?
Professor.
Yeah.
I want to say that. I want to say something.
Yes, Alejandro.
Okay. We learn about how we can work in group, because in our labor we must we must work in groups with colleagues, with colleagues, and also individual, but it's obligatory work the collect for practice and create knowledge and yo compartir.
Yeah, to share. Yeah.
And share our experience.
Yes, I think so. Picking up where Alejandro left off, yes, it's very important to know that part of the idea of purpose of reading is about sharing information and helping, and also collaborating and helping each other understand the text. So the idea here is getting engaged in a sense of collaboration as we read the different texts. We're going to stop right there because it's almost 10 and I have other things to do, but what's going to happen is I want to encourage you to continue doing this at least, or continue doing at least during all the activities in our class that require reading, and continue doing this exercise of engaging in reciprocal teaching. Do not revert, and I think the lesson you want to learn today is do not revert to the way you used to read before. Move forward and start doing more of this small group reading, that is silent reading. There are moments to talk about the text. There are moments to do summaries and raise questions and predict. That will give you more tools to really engage in real comprehension. So we're going to stop here today. Again, hoping that this demo gave you plenty of food for thought. And